Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. It's 12:31. Approval of the minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Dave? Okay, is there any discussion, amendments to the minutes? Corrections? Anybody good? Okay, all in favor of approval of the minutes say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Any abstentions? Okay, the minutes are approved. All right. We will try to keep this meeting shorter than normal. So let me first start with something that we promised last week. Did you know public comment? This is one of the requests that Danny had last week. So let's just talk about this. This is, if you recall last time, there was a document that looks very similar to this, but it was the fourth quarter for 2010-11. So this is the third quarter for the current year. So this is, if you were to compare this with what we did last year, there are several things that have to be understood when you're reviewing this document, however. Typically one would expect that because we're 3/4 of the way through the year that we would see minus 25% type numbers show up. Okay, and largely that does occur, although it occurs through some anomalies. On the revenue side, you'll see that the federal revenue is minus 87%, so that's lagging behind. The state revenue is 28% behind, and that will continue to grow because with these last few months, basically we get very little apportionment. And then when we actually get to the Q4, hopefully by the time that Q4 arrives, which is the end of July, that we will have received our backfill on apportionment. What the state has promised is if they have the money, they will give it to us sooner. If they don't, then it could be October. And also by way of information, I did speak with the auditor about what we're going to do in case the revenue from the state is older than 60 days. And the answer is that they don't yet know. Is they have to work this out statewide so that there's not a disparity between districts because everyone will be in the same position. So if there's a huge disparity, it might mean that everybody has to adjust their final statements downward. So in our case, that could mean that we go from $118.6 million conceivably down to $115 million for our ending balance. It just depends on how they calculate that. So they're still working on that. Now, in terms of the expenditures, it's also difficult because this is a snapshot in time. So whether a payroll hit or a payroll didn't hit, and what's owed and so forth. So you'll see that in terms of the academic salaries, it's minus 34. Classified as minus 33. Those can be anomalies in payroll scheduling too. You'll see that the benefits are minus 23%. You actually have to wait fully into July in order to close the books and to bring all that back into balance. So overall, the expenditures are running 33% below, most of which, however, can be attributed to anomalies in payroll scheduling. So it's difficult to draw too many conclusions from this, but you can see that roughly speaking, we're where we would have expected to be. So if there are any questions on the third quarter, this will next go to the Board of Trustees, by the way. So at the May meeting, this will go to the board. And then what happens is we transmit the third quarter 311Q to the Chancellor's office in Sacramento. Okay, are there any questions on this one? No? Okay, let me pass this one around for information as well.
just got a quick question on that. The
Right.
budget adjustments, what, where do they come from? What do they represent? How does that happen? Is that like mid-year changes to the budget?
Yes, after the budget's adopted, then there are adjustments to the budget.
And are those approved by the board, or how does that happen?
They're mid-year, aren't they?
Yeah, they are approved by the board. If you see on the revenue side, the 2020, the total adjustment, which is equivalent to the expenditure, that was a result that we got more funding for a grant, and we were entitled to some indirect costs. So all the augmentation, when we get new grants, are being board approved.
Okay, but like for instance, under academic monthly, it went down, sorry, I didn't bring my reading glasses today,
Right.
so it went down, it looks like $373,000. So when was that adjustment made and why was that made?
Danny, those are the budget transfers that we're doing. Some budget transfers, Anthony can tell you that.
And different costs are manageable. Want to change the budget for whatever reasons, they'll submit a transfer reason for as they're instructed.
So these are from deans that tell you they want to switch money. So this money, the 373, or what is it, what it says, yeah. Where did that money get moved to? If you removed it from academic monthly?
Well, and typically, these are zero-sum gains, so what you'll see is that, for instance, stipends got picked up for $110,000, non-teaching certificated got increased by $263,000. The bottom line is that anytime a manager requests a budget transfer, it all has to balance out, because the final bottom line number does not change except with board approval, and typically that occurs through additional funding from some outside source.
All right, so I can see within academic salaries where it looks like it roughly evens out. Then you got classified. Oh, okay, maybe that does. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I see.
So if you
Okay.
see the adopted budget and the revised budget, it's off by $2,020.
Yeah, okay, I see.
And that got
because
approved
they're
by
up
the
there.
board.
Okay.
All right.
I just trying to understand.
Right.
Salary transfer can only go to another salary.
Yeah.
It's in the last
Yeah,
dollars.
yeah.
Okay, any other questions on that? Okay, so the one that I just handed out, the 2012-13 budget development for Brac for today. Okay, now this is also, and you start to understand the complexity of what you're really dealing with. You remember last time I said that there's $19.3 million in the current year budget for instruction. Okay, and that's in Dr. Bell's actual cost center, but that's a distributed reserve, and what that does is it holds money for all the adjunct faculty. And then with each successive month, money is actually transferred to the appropriate division. So it is difficult to compare one year with the, deal with this one.
Oh, sorry. Okay, thank you.
It's difficult to compare one year with the next because there are always changes and there are anomalies. So the 2012-13 actual, those are the actual expenditures with that adjunct money having been transferred into the appropriate divisions. So that's a more accurate reflection of what took place. But then when you adopt the budget, because in our current system we do not know which adjunct might be teaching what class and at what rate, all that money is reallocated back into Dr. Bell's cost center and then distributed with each successive month. Okay, so you'll see that the academic budget has dropped by $4 million, $4.5 million over the previous year. Now then you get into further anomalies when you drop down. So student and learning services, administrative services, president's area, and on its face that looks like a huge increase on the president's, but it's really not. And what we now have to do, when we transferred last year from having 3 basic vice presidential areas into 5 now, we moved, for instance, Dwayne Cable's operation came from admin services and went into the president's area. And that's because it's the 1,000 block, it's the, for instruction, the 2,000 block of cost centers for student and learning services, 3,000 block for administrative services, and the 4,000 block for the presidents. Okay, so what we'll have to do is in the future, we're going to add several other areas, such as information technology. SASE got moved in. There were a couple other things that got moved in as well.
Well, education.
Educational services got moved in as well, so it moved from instruction into the president's area. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add a couple line items.
Probably human resources. too.
Human resources was before.
Okay.
So the bottom line is you're always comparing apples with oranges here. So when you're comparing one year with the next, you do have to be careful to understand what took place. And then the funded programs. So in order to start to envision what will happen next year is that we will go through and we will try to come up with some percentage reduction that each one of these areas needs to work through. So if we end up with, I'm going to predict that the 116,018 at the bottom will turn into something closer to 104 or 105 million for next year. Also realize the 116 has built into it $2 million worth of sacrificial money where we expected the mid-year cut. So that number in reality is 114 because that's what the expenditures were really based on. So we had this sacrificial piece that we knew would come out. And then when we end up with the almost $3 million from the current year budget, that brings us down to about $111 million. And then if we have another reduction of $6.5 million, that's where we come to $104 or $105 million. So on its face, it also looks worse than it is, but it certainly is not good news. So this is the basic building block that we will start to develop next year's numbers from. So next time or the time after that, we should have a prediction of precisely the bottom line where the reductions need to occur. Now, the likelihood is that, and I would suggest that we not go into the languages division and say you have to cut by $300,000 or whatever. Library, you need $188,000 or whatever. That what we do instead is we go to instruction, we say we're going to need a reduction off of the $68 million, and that's going to have to be a $7 million reduction. So that it occurs off the bottom line, therefore leaving the individual areas the maximum amount of flexibility in order to come up with the new number. Does that make sense?
Excuse me, clarification question. In column 2010-11 actual, first entry for instructions.
Yes. No. And that's what I was explaining is that you have about $19 million that is held in distributed reserve. As you move through the year, that number depletes and it actually goes to the various different divisions. So your 2010-11 actual is a more accurate number. The 2011-12 is not accurate because you're sitting on all that distributed reserve for all adjunct faculty. Right.
Okay, so the 10-11 includes the adjunct hourly.
Yes.
And the 11-12 does not. That's the difference.
It does, but it's in instruction.
It's in that 20 million.
The very first.
Oh, up at the top, sorry.
Yeah.
And 19.3 of that amount of money is for the adjuncts.
And that ties back to your expenditure line more or less. Right?
It does what now?
It ties back to the instruction adjunct overload hourly line in the expenditures on the budget.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry. Off the operating statement.
You have the Q3, right?
Right. Gary?
On this sheet here, it says 16,018,306. No, here you
Yes.
say 307. Where's
That's
the
a
dollar?
round.
Who took the dollar?
Maurice
all I wanted
wiped
to
it. It'll go back on a payroll
Just
deduct.
being funny.
Yeah, and that could have been my error
That's okay.
or a rounding error.
So can we get a breakdown of, like, for the adjunct hourly, how much we're spending in each of the divisions?
Yeah, that changes every single month.
Okay. I mean, did you originally set up a budget based on the divisions, or it was just a lump sum?
No, and what you'll see is if you look at the 2011-12 budget, Those are the actual budget numbers that were set up. Okay, but then when you compare that with the actual of 2010-11, it gives you a sense of the adjuncts. But there are some other changes in it. But basically, it does give you a sense of what the disparity is. So you'll see in the library, there's very little difference between the budget and actual, and you would expect that. But on the other hand, if you were to look at, for instance, languages, there's like $2 million difference. So it's going to give you a pretty accurate sense of how that works. Okay, any other questions? This is information, and it'll be developed a little further, and it'll be made more complex as we get into it for the sake of setting up next year's budget. And that'll have to happen fairly soon in order to get rolling on all this. Because what we don't want is in July for us to be looking at each other wondering where the money's going to come from. Okay, any other questions on that? Okay, I spoke with the auditors, I said yesterday, and asked if she would be amenable to coming here and speaking to the group and having whatever questions you would like to have answered. I assume that that's okay with the group. She can discuss any issue dealing with any of the finances of the institution. She can also discuss the cash flow issues from her perspective. She can discuss the deferred apportionment in terms of the effect that it has not only in us but other colleges. She is currently out of the country, but she will be back in about 2 weeks. So if we could maybe schedule that 3 weeks from today, if that's agreeable to everybody. And whatever questions you like asked of the auditor, you can do it that way. Similarly, in terms of the OPEB, and I'll transition here briefly to the self-insurance funds. OPEB stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits, which is the amount of money that we have promised to our full-time staff, employees, who retire prior to the age of 65, and where we cover their health benefits until the age of 65. And then past 65, we cover $1,440 per employee. So the other post-employment benefits, according to GASB 43 and 45, requires us to note those in our financial statements because they are long-term liabilities. Therefore, one way or another, you have to cover them. It used to be that you could pay for those as you go, and the problem is that governmental agencies have gotten into cash flow trouble and have not properly attributed those numbers and accounted for them, at which point people become short of cash in order to cover those expenses. Therefore, that has a pretty debilitating effect on the cash flow position and the bottom line of any of those organizations. So if you recall, a number of years ago, Dr. Kostler began the process of setting up this OPEB fund in order to start to cover those. We decided to go in the way that those funds were still available to us, so that they are unrestricted. They are, what's the word I'm after? Irrevocable. So if we were to put it into an irrevocable trust, it would mean that we could not touch the money and it would be there forever. In the truest sense, that would be the more correct way of doing things. What the district has chosen to do is to not do that, but instead to put it into a separate fund that we still have access to. Now, on the one hand, you can claim that money, because it has not been set aside into an irrevocable trust, really is not complying with the intent of GASB 43 and 45. Our auditors have taken the position that we have a long-term liability, in this case of about $15 million, and we have assets that we've set aside into a fund for about $15 million. So the liabilities go up on the balance sheet, but so have the assets. Between the two of them, they offset each other. Therefore, there's a zero impact on the balance sheet. If you didn't do that with each year, you would increase your liabilities, which is what some districts have done, which means that every year your financial situation is weakening. Helps us with our cash flow. And per chance, if the laws of the land change, then that money is immediately available to us in any event. For instance, if the healthcare laws actually cover some of those expenses, it can have huge impact on that fund. In the meantime, and we are asking our actuarial if he can come in here too and explain where we are with all that stuff. God approves. So if we have the actuarial here who actually did the study, what he will tell us is that his judgment is that we are adequately funded for the next 3-year period without any major change, of course, and that we have sufficient assets to cover the expected liabilities that are currently in existence. So what I'm going to propose is that if he can do that presentation to us, and furthermore to do that same presentation thereafter to the Board of Trustees, because it has an impact on us that we would not contribute to that fund for at least the next year.
And that annual amount has been about what?
Well, we did 1.4 million, I think.
Last year we.
Last year is 0. The current year was 0.
10.7, we put 2.4 plus 1.4.
1.4.
The, as you go is the 1
Right.
million.
So it was 1.4 plus the $1 million. So what occurs is that we put the 1.4 into the OPEB fund, and the $1 million covered our ongoing expenses that we have for those employees who have retired. So when we do it that way, what it's done is allowed us to build up that fund to the point where it now is. So now all we have to do is do the pay-as-you-go, and we don't have to do the contribution to the OPEB fund because according to this actuarial, we are fully funded for the moment. That will change as different employees are hired and so forth. But with the current actuarial, that's where we are. So it is a very technical document, and it is extremely dense to understand. So if we were to have the actuarial come here and explain the process and the numbers, I assume that would be better for everybody too. Yes?
Sure.
No?
Yeah, just a couple of questions. One is we didn't fund the 1.4 million last year, but we did fund the 1 million.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay.
The ongoing cost.
The ongoing costs.
Right.
And then secondly, the last time I checked, I thought that fund had about 16.4 million.
But that's two parts of it. Again, it's the ongoing portion as well. So what you'll see in that fund is, let me just look it up. The workers' comp, while I'm looking, the workers' comp fund is in a similar actuarial study. However, with the workers' comp fund, we are upside down by $2 million. While I'm looking that up, do you want to explain that, Marie?
Yeah. When we closed our book last year, we didn't have the actual study, the actuarial for the workman's comp. And when we got that and we got the audit, they found out that we did not provide enough asset to cover whatever potential claim we're going to have based on the actuarial study. Because we are self-insured, so we are paying actual claims for workman's comp. So the 2 million right now is unfunded because we have more liabilities than our asset.
So what we're proposing to do is to continue our practice, which is this year we increase the contribution rate for employees into the workers' comp fund. And I think that we're expecting that number to increase this year by $200,000. And what we need to do then is to test it at the end of the year and see if that's actually what happened. The trouble that we have is we have no control particularly over workers' comp claims. But what we're trying to do is we have to set aside sufficient money to cover the expected liability. So that's actuarially driven as well. So we hire a consultant to do that number.
The actual study, is the actual study based on claims or based on dollar costs?
It's based on claims and the
The number of
life
claims?
cost of the claim. So it's the actuarial study details when the employee was injured, at what age, what the expected outgo will be for that person's life, and then it tallies all that up. So the reality is it is a theoretical number based on actuarial assumptions. Dan?
You've read news reports that say the workers' comp is being renegotiated to change the way it's being paid out. Is that going to affect us in any way? All right, how is that going to affect us?
Well, it depends on what the final outcome is. But, obviously if the claims are lower, then our long-term liabilities would be reduced. In the meantime, the auditors did put a note in our audit that we are $2 million out of balance. And they suggested that we need to come up with a way of making that up because it is a liability on your balance sheet. So what we're trying to do is inch that up, and hopefully the claims will drop. Now, it's not every year that you do an actuarial study. So we're required on that one every 2 years and every 3 on the GASB. Right.
So when was the last workers' comp study?
We just did it.
Just this year?
Yeah. And we're going to see if we can have that person discuss that here too if you want. Dave and then Danny.
Yeah, could we get some figures on basically how much we are paying out in insurance between 55 and 65 of people that retired?
Yeah, well, and that's actually...
Versus the 1440, I mean, that's for everybody, I think.
No, that was the back gate closing. The total is $1 million. How much of that is the 1440 and how much of that is the other? Do we have a way you can come up with that?
We have a way of
Okay.
doing that.
So, and getting back to Danny's first question, is 15.598 million is the fund balance for Fund 64.
Sorry, what was it?
15.598, basically 15.6. And that's very similar to what the actuarial number is. And actually, I think that it might, were we off by $250,000? I think we were. On the actuarial for GASB, for the OPEB. So we're right there, and that's why. So we'll ask the person if he can come by and explain that to us.
What-
Bob?
The-
Oh, sorry.
No, sorry.
Just a very quick question. The interest that accumulates on that, does that go back into that fund or go to the
Yes,
bottom line?
goes back to that fund. However, as Marie is quick to point out, the interest rate at the moment is less than 1%.
Right.
So it's basically pocket change.
You can't put it into something, I mean, this is for some long-term, you can't put it into something?
We put it into the county treasury, which we are required to do. And the county treasurer must put it into zero risk sureties. Because of what Orange County did a number of years ago, where they were kind of playing the ponies.
What is the fund number for the workman's comp, or is that included in the same?
61.
That's 61, okay.
And 64 is OPEB.
64 is, yeah.
Okay? That help everybody? So does that answer your questions generally with regard to the self-insurance?
Yeah, more or less. But with the workman's comp, you're saying, the auditor is saying we're 2 million under what we should have in there, which, what do we have in there roughly? I mean,
Do you know?
just roughly. Oh, that's okay.
No, she'll look it up.
So you're saying that they're going to raise the amount that's taken out of everybody's...
No, our contribution. The district's contribution.
Okay, by 200,000
By
this year.
200,000.
Okay.
Okay, now, that's a good faith effort on our part, because it's not like we have money to burn, which helps in terms of the audit. And we're going to see where we are at the end of the year, because if the claims have dropped, then that number will help us out.
So the actuarial is not on actual expenses, and maybe you already explained that and I just didn't follow, but it's based on possible claims.
Yeah, it's a series of assumptions based on a person's expected lifespan, yes.
Okay.
And it's also a complex document.
But I mean, do you know roughly what we've been averaging on actual payouts on these kind of claims? I mean, again, I'm just
I
talking.
think that Marie probably has that in the budget.
That's my reading glasses.
This is before the 2 million.
Okay.
Because the audit was after we adopted the budget.
Folks, you know, since we're recording, they need to peek into these mics, or else nobody's going to hear them.
Yeah. For the sake of the recording, we do need to use the microphones.
Yeah, it looks like it says around 200,000, right? Is that correct? Am I
What
reading?
is left on the fund balance for this current year was 200,000. That was before we had the audit and the actuarial study.
Okay.
So that's how much is actually in there. I mean, was in there at the end of last
The
year.
cash
Yeah.
and
And
then
then,
county treasury.
and then how much have we actually been paying out over the last few years on average? I
I
mean,
have to get to that,
okay.
which
Thanks.
want the actuals.
Okay. Good?
Yep.
Okay, let's see here. I think that the only other thing that I would like to discuss is to come back to the pie chart.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did want to talk about the dental fund at some point.
Okay, well, ask.
Well, I'd just like you to go over, because it appears to me that there's about $4.3 million in that fund, and that we funded at about $1.3 million per year. So we've apparently been overfunding it to some degree. So I guess we would need to know how much we've spent on, partially I don't fully understand how, I know you've explained it to me before, but how it works, because it's not really a self-insurance fund, if I understand correct. But anyway, my point is that there's about $4.3 million in there, and that we funded, I believe, about $1.3 million per year. We didn't fund it last year, at least I didn't think we did, but when I was looking at it, it looked like we did. But again, maybe I just didn't understand this thing. I'm trying to get to is, can we lower the amount that we're contributing to it, because we're clearly putting more in there than we need to if we've got a $4.3 million in there, and I don't know how much we've actually been spending over the last 2 or 3 years on average, just so we had an idea of what's really needed to be in that fund. Because that's one of the biggest things that's contributing to the deficit for next year, because we said we're going to put that 1.3 back in. That's a lot of money.
Our carry forward was basically $2.9 million. And then what we did is we actually subtracted $1.3 million last year in order to balance the budget. So the carry forward at the end of this year is likely to be about $1.3 million, 1.4 in that neck of the woods.
When you say so there's going to be, because this is showing 4.3 million available.
Right. And what you'll see, when you balance all that stuff out, you'll see at the top, fund balance, unrestricted 2.9, that's the carry forward.
Okay.
Okay, the rest of it is the budgeting and the accounting. What you're going to find is that 2.9 will have dropped to under 1.5 for the carryover from 11-12 to 12-13.
So you're saying that we would have spent this year, whatever, 2.9 minus, so about $1.4 million we actually spent?
Yes.
Is that reflected, where's that reflected, for instance, on?
It'll be in benefits. Although, what you're going to, yeah, but you know what, it's a different fund, because that's Fund 1.
Oh, yeah.
This is
Right.
Fund 63. But it's a part of the benefit plan. It's just the way that it's structured is somewhat complex.
So have we been spending about $1.3 million?
I don't know what the actual is.
I can just give everything.
And you know, there's a shot that number will have been reduced because the number of employees have been reduced as well. When we have the number of vacancies that we have, that number could be lower.
Okay.
But yes, our contribution to the dental fund will be a part of the overall budget plan. That we won't contribute more than we have to.
Right, okay, well, that's what I'm saying. If
Right.
1.3 is more than we need, maybe we could reduce that by
Right.
$500,000 or something, so.
Right. Okay, anything else? Okay, so let's have another crack at the year-end budget reallocation, because it's so much fun. If we can just dim, there's nothing new here again, but although what I did do is, no, that didn't turn out particularly well either. Let me just see if I can fix that. Make it a little more clear, so that this, last time there was a motion to approve option A, and I didn't list these, but it's the department and it was the graduation fund. I'm going to assume that not many people would like to talk about status quo of just moving it all into capital outlay, but I'm perfectly willing to do that if there's an interest. Therefore, if we go to the second line, which is B and D, is it raining that hard? Basically, the difference between B and D is the employee portion. So there was a sentiment that we shouldn't have an employee portion, and that would be option D. And option B is the employee portion at 20, the reserve and cash flow at 20, and the department's at 10%. So last time Alex had to leave, and therefore we postponed the discussion till this time. And if there are any questions or comments or a motion, we can have another crack at one of them. Dave?
Yeah, I still like the capital outlay, will not like to see 50% going to that. But technology part, I believe he was saying about the AIS system. How much does he actually need for that? How much is in the fund?
We need on the order of $11 million, and we have on the order of 7.
But that was for the smart classrooms and the computers and everything else?
No, that's separate yet. That's in addition to. The actual AIS system is likely to be 11 million, and we are trying to accomplish that also in the 18-month period. So the 18-month between the two of them shouldn't be confused. Bob and then Alex.
Oh, good, Alex. Good.
Okay, just so to be clear, when you're saying the 11 million, that's to expedite it for the 18-month period, correct?
What's the total cost?
But in any event, it's going to be over an 18-month
Yes.
period or over a 24-month
Yes.
period. We would expect something on the order of $11 million.
Okay.
So we're about $4 million short at the moment.
Okay.
First Bob, and then I'll have Dan.
So, a day like today reminds us why the capital outlay budget needs to be what it is. We were just chatting about that briefly. So that's 50%. So option A, just as a reminder, the employee that was the one-time off salary, off schedule thing, reserve cash flow, what percentage was that?
20.
20, and then 5% the departments and 5% to the graduation fund.
Right.
That's what that was, right?
That's what that was.
And we did a motion on that last time and it didn't pass, I think, for some
Correct.
reason.
Therefore, for Robert's Rules of Orders, that one's off the table unless a person's changed their mind.
Oh, is that right? Huh. Really?
Yes.
No.
In its current, that option A, unless a person who voted in favor has changed, who voted opposed has
Oh, that
changed
makes
their
sense.
mind.
That makes sense, okay.
Well, but I thought there were a number of us that opposed it
If a
because
person-
there wasn't
For lack
enough
of discussion, opportunity to discussion.
So somebody could make a new, I mean, that one's not out of the picture because somebody could make a motion
So
To reconsider?
It-
Make a motion to reconsider?
or
A motion to
whatever.
reconsider has to be done by the majority the last time. So a person in the majority the last time has to change their vote. Gary?
I think where we left off at is that we wanted a little more explanation of the graduation fund. I don't think we dismissed it, but we did vote against it, but we had a contingency that we needed further explanation about the graduation fund.
Okay. I promised Dan to speak.
The AIS system, can Proposition P funds be used to pay for the AIS?
Measure P, it was not contemplated in the language of Measure P. So Measure P was passed in 2002. We have to be very circumspect that what we promised the voters that we would do is included in the language of what we did do. So what we promised the voters in terms of technology was the infrastructure upgrade. And I think that we spent $3.6 million out of Measure P and $3.6 million out of capital outlay in order to provide is that right, the correct number? For the telephone system and the backbone, all the rewiring of the campus.
But AIS be considered an infrastructure upgrade?
It's a valid question, and in fact, we're hiring a bond counsel to answer similar questions, so I can ask.
So, because isn't there quite a bit of money still in that Measure P fund, because that building ended up costing almost
Yes.
like 20 million less than expected?
Yes, and
So-
therefore there's about 20 million.
So why did we even spend 3.6 million out of our capital outlay if it could have all come out of Measure P?
Well, and you have to realize that the latest building that we bid on is the one that came in light, which is the Center for the Arts. Up to that point, we were technically close to being overextended on Measure P. So that decision was made a number of years ago, in fact, by Dr. Kostler. So, and the bid for Center for the Arts came in about a year and a quarter ago.
So, I mean, even in this year's budget, there was $3 million for technology upgrades, which sound like they would come under the Measure P funding. So, I mean, I think we should be really careful to use as much, because I don't know what's going to happen with all that excess money in Measure P, but let's use it.
You remember last time what I said was Measure P does have classroom upgrade? Okay, technology upgrade is included personal computers and so forth around the campus. That really is not a function of Measure P. However, what we did promise the voters is to do, for instance, smart classroom upgrade. And that's on the order of $15,000 a copy, times about 200 rooms. So that's about $3 million. Okay, so we did promise the voters that we would do classroom upgrade, which certainly includes technology. So yes, we are working on that.
Conversion and one
Classroom upgrade.
Okay, and those are coming out of the capital outlay. So why are we spending money out of the capital outlay for those things that seem to be clearly under Measure P?
No, and we're not, Danny, is that there are issues that are Measure P and then there are issues that are not. Okay, wherever it's possible to attribute it to Measure P, we are. So you are correct that we have classroom conversions in Measure P, which, for example, when the Arts Division moves out of the R building and moves to the Center for the Arts, there is money left over in order to be able to do something with the space that they're vacating. Okay, that is a function of Measure P because it's a secondary effect to the project that we promised the voters. Okay, if somebody wants to change a classroom, that is not a Measure P function. However, what we are doing is classroom upgrade is a part of Measure P, and you will find that a lot of money is being spent in that out of Measure P.
But don't we have a category under our own capital outlay that's...
Those are non-Measure P projects.
What makes them, if they're, I mean, again, I'm not trying to be difficult, I'm just trying to understand, if it's called classroom upgrade and Measure P pays for an upgrade, what's different about these upgrades as opposed to those upgrades?
If you were to go through the Measure P bond, what we went to the voters with, that is what we're restricted to do. If we can get it out of there, then we do. If it does not fit in there, then we don't.
Okay, so is it the building, like, I mean, again, I'm not trying to get into the nitty-gritty, but I mean, so are there certain buildings that aren't considered Measure P, so an upgrade in that building you can't put under Measure P, or what is it?
No. For example, if we're converting the space of the Lancer radio, okay, that's not a Measure P project, that's a district project.
Because the district decided to do that?
And it was not as a function of Measure P, right?
I mean, because they didn't say we were going to change that, so it wasn't mentioned in there, and so they can't use the money for that?
That's what I mentioned earlier to Dan, is when we have bond counsel, what we do is we say, here's what the language of the bond said.
Okay.
What parameters must we abide by? There are some very clear guidelines, and then we have an oversight committee that we answer to. So we are very circumspect, which is, by the way, you know, in terms of the reputation of the district, how we believe that we will be able to, if the board approves, to go out for another bond measure. Because some other districts have played rather loose with the money. We have not. Everything that we've promised, we've over-delivered.
So what we'll end up with, I mean, again, I think it's around $20 million. It's a lot of money. What's going to, I mean, does that money just sit in there and we continue, or what happens?
Yes, it does sit in there and it draws interest that goes to Measure P. One of the things that occurred with the Center for the Arts is that, if you recall, during the run-up to the Chinese Olympics and the Three Gorges Dam projects and the Chinese boom in housing, is that construction costs everywhere soared because the price of steel worldwide shot up, the price of concrete shot up, and so forth. During that time, the budget for Measure P went from about $45 million to about $72 million in anticipation that we didn't have enough money to finish the building through no fault of our own. Then what happened is that we made the building somewhat smaller and included the V building into the equation. And we expanded the view of the Center for the Arts to include not only the building that we're building right now, but also the V building. So there are 2 music classrooms that are now going to be in the V building. Sculpture is going to be there. Screen printing is going to be there. There are functions that should have been a part of the Center for the Arts that were moved to the V building. Therefore, the conversion of the V building is really a part of the Center for the Arts. And there are some technical legal questions that we have to work our way through with bond counsel and how to ensure that we are fully in compliance with the voter wishes.
So if we end up doing everything that was in Measure P and there's money left, it just goes back to the state? Is that, or how is that?
No, it's not state money, it's district money. District property owners. If we were to, which is one of the options, is we could say, you know what, we're giving it all back, at which point then each property owner within the district would basically be credited with the money we turn back in.
Okay.
And we're about to run out of money, out of time again for you if we're not careful.
Yeah,
sorry.
it's fine.
Let me, do you have a...
Yeah, I know you said you got 20 million left.
Okay, let me get back to that point if I could,
Yeah,
Dave.
sorry.
Let me just deal with Alex.
Well, I just wanted to say in terms of this Measure P discussion, I feel like I have to weigh in.
Oh, you
considering
wanna-
that I sit on Measure P. I can say that the questions that have been brought up here, it's not, the members of Measure P have brought up similar questions, and I trust that the district will do its part in trying to find answers to see if money, because the district has come many a time to Measure P and Measure P to the district, especially when it comes to these digital infrastructure types of things, to see if Measure P money can be spent. So this is being explored, and I trust that the district will do its due diligence in making sure if it can be done, it will be done.
And how big is our oversight committee? 14? We have 14 members, Citizens Oversight Committee, that looks over our shoulders over all this stuff. In fact, we have a meeting in about 25th, so a couple days shy of 2 weeks. And these are the questions that we answer to them too. When do you actually have to leave now? You've got to go now?
Just about now, yeah. Unfortunately.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't know he was under a time constraint.
He's always got to go to class. I'll tell you what, we will one more time defer this until you...
If it is not deferred, I trust this body to make a decision.
No, I'll defer it, because some people just want to get out and play in the puddles too, so they're dying to get out of here.
Since he has to go, I was going to propose that we take A back for consideration again, but if he has to leave, we can.
No, I'll tell you, well, let's just pick it up here next time again.
That's good.
Is that all right by everybody?
Yeah.
Is everybody just dying to go through this anyway? Danny is.
No, I want to suggest that we reduce capital outlay and the cash reserve, but anyway, we can discuss that next time, so, anyway. I know he's got to go.
Okay, Dave.
Yeah, I just want the 20 million that's left in
Okay.
Measure P, has the elevator upgrade been
Yes.
taken out of it?
No.
And the restrooms?
No, it's there.
So
What we
that still
took-
has to be done for what we...
No, and understand, Danny's question was a very specific one. There's 20 million left after that, because basically the Center for the Arts, we were expecting when the Center for the Arts bids were opened, that day we were expecting bids in the high 40 millions. Came in at 28.3. That's how the economy has softened. Okay, that's the delta that he's talking about. That's on top of the budgeted projects that we still have in Measure P. So the elevator upgrade is still there. The restroom upgrade is still there. What we've done, however, is the U building money is we're going to redeploy, because we're not going to be doing work in the U building because it had 2 elevators that are absolutely on their last legs, Okay, well, we're not going to replace elevators in the U building. On the other hand, the elevators in the other buildings are more expensive than we thought, which is why we're just about to go back out to bid on them again. We only got one bid the last time, and it was, I think, $300,000 higher than we thought it should be, so we're going to go out to bid again. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. You know, I bet you looked at this, it was on 20,000 left.
No, I think that, and I don't remember the exact number, but I think that right now in cash, in Measure P, there's probably still in the $50 million somewhere. However, the Center for the Arts is a chunk of that. We've already paid for a chunk of it, too. Okay. Anything else? Okay, so next week, obviously, we're dark. The week after that, we will see you again. Is there a motion to adjourn? So moved.
Also on the capital outlay, on scheduled maintenance and the non-Measure P fund.
Yeah.
Did we get an estimate of what you
Oh, I thought
actually
we
were doing?
never did that. I think we prepared that. I haven't done that. The scheduled maintenance portion of the capital outlay, of the fund 43? Okay, all right. 41 we did, not 43. Okay, there's a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Okay, any objection? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.